as an athlete, how did you start the sport of equestrian? Did from a very young age, were you in love with horses when you were young?
My dad used to train race horses, and so I was exposed to them the early mornings and waiting, and it was so boring. It was so boring because I'm like watching these horses go by, and I'm thinking, what? And I was saying it would be fun if I could be riding. That's sort of how it started, and then we're 34 cousins on my dad's side, and I'm number 32. So my older cousins were all riding, and it's like when you're a kid, it's like, oh, I want to be cool like them. I want to be cool like them. So I was like telling my mom and dad I want to ride horses. I was 8. They're like, no, no, no. So my dad taught me how to bowl. He taught me how to play golf. And those are sports that, he was already involved in also. He tried to teach me every sport just to keep me away from riding horses. But when I was 10, they gave up. I guess I was too makulit. And that's when I started riding. And then my cousins all stopped. So I was like, gee, thanks, great, I don't know if I stayed riding because I might as well, stay now that I got them to say yes. But I don't know. I mean, it's just been a part of me.
Where have you trained in the Philippines? Like, where are there places to train with horses?
So I started in this riding school called De Rosa, which was in the Guadalupe area in Makati, but it's closed already. And then there were a few riding schools at that time, but there's only one left right now, which is the Manila Polo Club. So at a certain stage, I actually started training overseas. I started training abroad because there are a lot more competitions. So there's a lot more opportunity for exposure at a higher level. And geographically, the Philippines is disadvantaged in equestrian sport because we have to fly everywhere. So when you're competing at the lower level, there are some competitions where you ride the horses that are owned by the host countries, but most times when you're wanting to compete at a higher level, you need to have your own horse already. And the investment to bring in a horse that can compete at that level and bring it into the Philippines and then back out at certain times is close to impossible because of quarantine standards that the other countries have higher quarantine standards than us, and so it's very complicated for us. So I did most of my training in Australia because my dad would travel there often, so he had made a lot of friends there and connections. So I've had the same coach since I was 16. She's still a very strong competitor in Australia, in spite of a hip replacement, cancer, and broken bones all over her body. She's still one of the strongest competitors there. So she's definitely been a role model for me, even in being able to balance, work and motherhood and all sorts of things. So, I've had a lot of, I've also had a lot of female role models. And to be in a family where I never felt there was no difference. It doesn't, we never even talked about gender really, so I think when you grow up in that kind of environment, the sport I'm in, men and women compete against each other, there's no distinction. So even having picked that, I think it's a lot. Yeah, you don't think about it, you end up not thinking about it. Yeah.
Well, thank God you never gave up equestrian, because you accomplished so much for the Philippines, and you won the first 3 gold medals in the Busan Games in 2002. And that's such a huge accomplishment. And I know that I have family members who told me your story about you are that popular. My family members told me your story, and we wanted to know what was preparation like for that? I know that you trained in Australia, so did you train with a horse there and have to bring the horse, or was there a horse in Busan already that you just had to train with there? So we wanted to know about that.
Yeah. So, okay, I didn't have a horse at that time that could compete. Well, I had a horse that, okay, so I'm not sure where to start. When I was younger and training, I did keep two horses in Australia because I was competing in World Cups in Australia. As I said, it's not possible to go back and forth. It's completely, well, it's just not feasible. It's not possible. So I would keep horses there, and every break I had, summer break from school, or, when I finish a movie, I would always go and train for a couple of months. But when the time of the Asian Games, I already had two kids. So I gave birth to my second son in December of 2001, and the Asian Games were in 2002. 3 weeks later, I was kickboxing and pulling my own stitches out because I was like,
oh my goodness,
I have to get back into it, After 5 weeks, I was riding again, but I did not have a horse. Christmas Eve, Dot, my husband, comes up to me with a piggy bank, and then it says on the butt of the pig, "For your Asian Games horse." Okay. And I was like, wow, I had been saving up my whole life for this horse because I also knew that I wasn't going to be able to keep that lifestyle of an international competitor and be at the standard that I wanted to be. So I knew that this was going to be maybe my last major international event. And I went to Australia and couldn't find that horse. I just couldn't find it. That one, the one, like a guy. I couldn't find the one. and ended up with this horse that wasn't even competing at the level of the Asian Games yet. But she had such talent and such a strong personality. It was really difficult because I was having moments of anxiety before training because she had such a strong personality that either she would see me on the ground or she would go through a brick wall for me. That's the kind of relationship that I had with this horse. So from Australia, knowing that I had to travel to Korea from Manila, I brought her home. Obviously had to do all the logistical, parts of it. And then, sorry. No. I didn't bring her home. From Australia, brought her home, and then was competing in Malaysia because there was a league for the Southeast Asian competitors. So that's where I trained. So I was in Malaysia for about 11 days and then home for 2 or 3. And that was my schedule from July until October.
When you're competing in such a huge stage, especially because you were representing the Philippines, there's a lot of pressure into that. And what was really interesting with what you said is your connection with your horse. And I've actually watched a few movies about that, when you're trying to build a connection and you're trying to build, most importantly, trust between you and the horse. So how does that process go? And when you saw your horse at that time, did you instantly have that connection?
No, not at all. It was like, what? This?
Oh my gosh.
I was telling my coach, no, we have to find something else. I said, we have to, I even said, look, I have the money. I've been saving up for this, my life as an actress, and this is probably going to be my last Asian Games. I said, let's make it the best that it can be. But her knowing me the way she did, she said, no, calm down. She said, this is the one. She said, this is the one because there's nothing that we can find anymore. Because I know you. She said, you're gonna completely regret spending more money on a horse that's just a little bit better than this one. I know you, she said. I know you, and I know that you can do it on this horse. She didn't say, I know you can win. She just said, I know that you can build that relationship with this horse. And it was funny because she, that's the last thing I was expecting my own coach to say, because she was also completely invested in me as an athlete, as a person, as a competitor. And my success is good for her, right? But no, she didn't let me do that. And it was really difficult building that relationship because she was a very difficult horse to ride. But the good thing about, like, let's say my dad, the way he supported me as an athlete was also as a racehorse trainer. He had a lot of rejects, and they would go to me and he would say, see what you can do with this horse, see if you can turn it into what you want it to be, and if you can't, give it back, but if you can, then it's yours. Wow. But they were all really, really difficult. They were all very difficult. That's why I have a lot of injuries. I've fallen off a lot of times because he would say, I'm not buying you a horse. I'm not buying you an expensive horse. I'm not buying you a nice horse that you can just sit on and be a doña. He was like, you have to earn your way up. You have to go through the hard parts.
That's so
which really helped. I mean, it really helped me because it was like learning different languages. It was learning to speak to different horses and trying to learn how to speak to them.
Horse whisperer.
I'm not that, but I had to try to learn, and I think in many ways to be able to communicate effectively now with what I do, people from different cultures and different backgrounds, I know that my being an equestrian specifically helped prepare me for something like that.
That's so crazy. They should make a movie about you and how you were able to connect with your horse during that time and won gold. That should be a movie.
Oh my gosh.
And you heard it here first, folks.
It's going to be a lot of crying, I'm going to tell you that.
Could have been an MMK.
Yeah,
totally.
That.
And in fact, there were people saying, why do you have a mascot in your stables? And I was like, a mascot? Because my horse was so different from everyone else's. She looked like, she wasn't this regal presence. She wasn't like that. She was sort of just like, yeah, whatever. She was a bit like,
did she have
Rustic Rouge. How the typical description of a redhead woman is?
Yeah.
That's her. Like so typecast. That's so her. So she'd walk by you and just be like, yeah, whatever. That's how she always was. And she's very sweet actually, but when you're on her, when you're riding her, she's like, no, I know how to do this. I want to do it my way. And of course I'm like, no, I want to do it my way. So she was very difficult and people would see me struggle. So when I won, they were all like, like literally people on the stands who were part of the riding community were like,
and they called Rustic Rouge a mascot. So they were all like,
yeah.
I wanted to ask, since that you've sort of become an advocate for the sport that you've loved for so long and accomplished so much in, we wanted to ask you, what are things that we could do to kind of gather more support around your sport and try and also inspire other Filipinos as well to try it out?
It's really a difficult sport to be in as a Filipino because just as with any sport, to experience it, to be able to try to do the sport is easy. But our goal is also to inspire people to become better, to want to compete. Because when you compete, that's when you're tested, right? It's you can do it recreationally and that's fine. But for us, it's like you have to challenge yourself. And to do it in sport at a young age, as painful as it is for us as athletes to get hurt physically, to lose, the consequences are actually not that big.
Mm.
It's emotional, but we're supposed to get over it. The good part, that's where the winning is when you don't get the medal. It's in being able to learn from that difficult experience and becoming stronger for it. But you're not losing bigger things. You know what I mean? When you're older and you take a risk and you make a mistake, you actually lose more. That's why we want younger people to get into sports. And in equestrian sport, the support that I would like to see and develop is an interest and an appreciation for the complexity of the sport, for the horse as an animal that in our society and in our culture, in many parts of the Philippines, a horse would be used to help people work.
Yeah.
Not to enjoy sitting on them, not to compete and jump and do things like that. And I think that's something that we have to embrace. It's not all about looking pretty in our clean, clothes and boots, because what people don't see is that before that we're wearing sweatpants or something over those to keep it clean while we're cleaning horse poop out of the stables.
Wow.
And that's something that people don't see. And it is an expensive sport. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna try to pretend that it's not. So I really do feel that if you want to get into this sport, don't expect someone else to foot the bill for you.
Mm.
Because for our horses to compete at the level that we compete, our horses eat like athletes.
Even more.
They are athletes, right? So if you want to say that you're doing this for your country, you can't be taking away from your fellow man, from your fellow Filipino, from your fellow Filipino athlete. So the support I want to see, if we could get some kind of financial support for the people who would like to get that first exposure in the international scene, or there's an important, tournament coming up and we want our athletes to be able to have that preparation, that they're not going to be burdened with trying to figure out how they're going to get their funds to be able to prepare for an important competition, that would be great. But beyond that, on like a more day-to-day basis or something, I think, that we have to also be responsible for ourselves, because it's not, even if it's a sport that everyone can experience, it's not a sport that everyone can compete in successfully unless you are prepared to make some kind of financial investment.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like saying that. I don't like saying that, and I don't like knowing it, but it's the truth. So it's just something I have to accept. It's one of the downsides of this sport that I love so much, that has given me so much. And I think it's also in my being able to be upfront and honest about it, that that we can have a more effective plan.
Yes. And I like that term you use, because it's absolutely right. Investment. And if it's equestrian or even any other sport, the athlete itself should also be prepared to take an investment in the sport that they're competing in. And it has to be financial, it has to be even your time, and as we were talking about, even your sleep. And if you really want it, you're going to try to get it. And I think that's absolutely right, especially for women athletes. Women athletes are just, for me, more driven. They just really want to break the boundaries and really prove something, that I can be this, I can be a mom, I can be a woman here. But when I compete, I'm an athlete, and I'm a high level athlete. And
Smart Sports, Tiebreaker Vodcast. She just knocked down a 3. She just scored the game-winning goal. So she did.